And finally, he told me, look, they do it. They are going to make a big film, television, 6 hours, on the story of Jesus.
What kind of director would dare take on one of the most sensitive stories in human history and turn it into a television event seen by millions? And how did that same man guide a production so intense that decades later, people still talk not only about the finished film, but about the strange atmosphere, the emotional weight, and the unforgettable moments behind the camera? When people remember Jesus of Nazareth from 1977, they usually think first of Robert Powell's piercing eyes, the quiet power of the storytelling, and the deep emotional impact of the film itself. But behind all of that stood one man, Franco Zeffirelli. He was not just a director making another historical drama. He was an artist with a powerful visual imagination, a strong sense of faith and tradition, and a reputation for turning familiar stories into grand, emotional experiences. And when he stepped into the world of Jesus of Nazareth, he brought with him not only talent, but also discipline, pressure, controversy, and a vision so strong that it shaped one of the most enduring portrayals of Christ ever put on screen. This is the story of Franco Zeffirelli's life, his rise as a filmmaker, and the extraordinary events, emotions, and unusual moments that surrounded the making of Jesus of Nazareth. Franco Zeffirelli was born in Florence, Italy in 1923, into a world already full of complexity. His childhood was marked by instability, emotional difficulty, and the kind of personal hardship that often leaves a permanent mark on a person's imagination. But those early struggles also seemed to shape the artistic sensitivity he would later bring to the screen. He grew up surrounded by the beauty of Italian culture, architecture, and Catholic tradition. In a city like Florence, visual beauty was not something distant. It was part of daily life. Churches, paintings, rituals, and sacred imagery were everywhere. That environment mattered because Zeffirelli would eventually become a director who understood how to make visual beauty feel spiritual, not just decorative. Before he became known internationally, he studied architecture and then moved into theater, where he learned discipline, staging, timing, and visual structure. He later worked with the great Italian director Luchino Visconti, and that experience became one of the foundations of his career. From theater and opera, Zeffirelli learned how to control movement, emotion, costume, and space. He developed the kind of style that did not hide itself. His work was rich, detailed, and emotional. He liked grandeur. He liked intensity. He liked stories that felt larger than life. By the time he took on Jesus of Nazareth, Zeffirelli was already internationally respected. He had directed Romeo and Juliet, which became one of the most famous screen versions of Shakespeare ever made. He had proven that he could take a story the world already knew and make it feel alive again. But Jesus of Nazareth was a different kind of challenge altogether. A Shakespeare adaptation might attract critics. A film about Jesus would attract the entire world's expectations. That was the burden Zeffirelli carried into this project. He was not simply telling a biblical story. He was touching a figure who meant everything to millions of believers. One wrong tone, one bad casting choice, one weak scene, and the whole project could collapse under criticism. That pressure was there from the start, and yet Zeffirelli accepted the challenge. What made him the right man for the job was not only his technical skill, it was his instinct for reverence without coldness. He knew that if he made the story feel too distant, it would lose its emotional force. But if he made it too ordinary, it would lose its mystery. He had to hold both things at once: the humanity of Jesus and the sense that this man was not merely another historical figure. That balance shaped every important choice in the production, especially the casting of Robert Powell as Jesus. At the time, Powell was not the most obvious choice if the goal had simply been star power. But Zeffirelli seems to have understood something crucial. If audiences recognize too much of the actor, they might never truly see the character. So he chose someone with a striking face, an unusual calm, and the ability to suggest something deeper than ordinary performance. That decision would become one of the most important in the history of religious filmmaking. Powell's performance did not rely on big speeches or dramatic movement. In fact, one of the reasons his portrayal became so unforgettable was because of how still he was. His face carried much of the role. His gaze in particular became iconic. He seemed to look through people rather than merely at them. That effect was not accidental. It came from Zeffirelli's direction, from makeup decisions, from camera framing, and from the director's understanding that in a film like this, the face of Jesus had to do more than communicate emotion. It had to carry presence. And that is where the making of the film begins to feel unusual. Many actors are directed to be expressive. Powell was guided toward restraint. Many biblical productions rely on theatrical grandeur. Zeffirelli wanted something quieter and more unsettling. The result was a Jesus who felt calm but never passive, tender but never weak, human but not ordinary. That kind of performance is very difficult to build. It demands not only skill from the actor, but absolute clarity from the director. But while the final performance looks serene, the production itself was anything but easy. The filming of Jesus of Nazareth was long, exhausting, and emotionally demanding. Much of it took place in North Africa, where the heat, long working hours, and harsh locations created real physical strain. This was not a comfortable studio environment where actors moved from trailer to set with ease. It was the kind of production that wore people down. Olivia Hussey, who played Mary, later spoke about how difficult the experience could be. She had to spend long periods away from her child, work extended hours, and carry the emotional burden of playing one of the most heartbreaking roles in the story. The suffering of Mary in the film was not just an idea on the page. It required emotional depth, control, and endurance. And when those crucifixion scenes were filmed, the emotional weight became even heavier. That is one of the most powerful things about the making of this series. It was not simply a technical exercise. The subject matter itself affected people. Day after day, they were living inside scenes of betrayal, sorrow, fear, violence, and spiritual conflict. For a normal production, actors step in and out of character. But a project like Jesus of Nazareth seems to have had a way of staying with people even after the cameras stopped. Robert Powell himself went through intense preparation for the crucifixion scenes. He reportedly reduced his food intake to make his body appear thinner and more worn. That choice may sound extreme, but it tells us something about the atmosphere Zeffirelli created. He was not interested in making the suffering of Christ look neat or symbolic. He wanted it to feel physically costly. At the same time, he never allowed the series to become crude or exploitative. That balance again reflects his control as a director. He pushed for realism, but always within a sacred dramatic frame. And then there was the strange emotional tension that surrounded the project from outside the set as well. Before many people had even seen the finished production, controversy began to build. Religious criticism appeared. Some feared that Zeffirelli might present Jesus in a way that weakened his divinity or altered the Gospels too much. There was anxiety, suspicion, and pressure. In the United States, even sponsorship became affected. That alone shows how delicate the project was. Zeffirelli was not just filming a miniseries. He was working under the shadow of public judgment before the film had even spoken for itself. In a strange way, that controversy only increased the drama of the production. It meant the cast and crew were not just trying to make something good. They were trying to make something worthy. They knew the audience would not respond casually. Viewers would watch with emotion, faith, expectation, and sometimes with criticism already prepared. This is what makes Zeffirelli's achievement so remarkable. He did not respond to that pressure by making the story safer or flatter. He leaned into sincerity. He made the world of the film full of real dust, real textures, real faces, and real silence. He allowed the story time to breathe. He used pauses. He let grief sit on the screen. He did not rush moments that mattered. That choice may sound simple, but it is one of the reasons Jesus of Nazareth still feels different from many later biblical productions. Modern films often feel the need to explain everything, speed everything up, or make every emotional beat obvious. Zeffirelli trusted stillness. He trusted the audience to feel the weight of a look, the tension of a pause, or the pain in a mother's face. And yet, for all its spiritual seriousness, the production was also full of practical oddities that gave it its unusual texture. Because of location conditions and production realities, much of the dialogue had to be dubbed later. That could have damaged the realism of the series, but instead it contributed to its almost timeless atmosphere. The voices feel controlled. The world feels shaped. Nothing is careless. Zeffirelli's theater and opera background helped him turn even the limitations of production into part of the final effect. This is also where his larger career matters. Franco Zeffirelli was not a minimalist. He did not believe in stripping art down until nothing remained. He believed in fullness. In his world, costume matters, architecture matters, lighting matters, music matters, the placement of bodies in space matters. He understood that when telling a sacred story, physical beauty can become part of emotional truth. That is why Jesus of Nazareth does not feel like a filmed sermon. It feels like a carefully built world, and that world had room not only for holy figures, but for human weakness. One of Zeffirelli's great strengths was that he did not turn everyone into a symbol. Judas is tragic. Pilate is conflicted. Mary is tender but brokenhearted. The disciples are devoted, but often frightened. Even when the story moves with reverence, the people inside it remain recognizable as human beings. That is not a small achievement. It takes confidence to preserve the sacred while still allowing people to look tired, confused, grieving, or morally weak. The emotional truth of the series comes from that human grounding. But perhaps the strangest thing of all is what happened after the film was released. For many viewers, Robert Powell did not merely play Jesus. He became the screen image of Jesus. That kind of reaction is rare and powerful. It meant Zeffirelli had succeeded in making a portrayal that entered the imagination of ordinary people. Viewers wrote letters. They spoke about the film with deep feeling. Some said it matched how they had always imagined Christ. Others were moved by the spiritual seriousness of the series. Whether one looks at it from an artistic or religious perspective, that response says something extraordinary about the impact of Zeffirelli's direction. Very few directors create work that becomes part of people's inner memory. Zeffirelli did. And this is why his life and career deserve attention beyond a single title. He was a filmmaker shaped by history, by Catholic imagery, by stage discipline, and by a love of visual storytelling. He brought all of that into Jesus of Nazareth. He did not make the series by accident. He made it because his entire artistic life had prepared him for something of that scale and emotional intensity. After Jesus of Nazareth, he continued working in film, theater, and opera. He remained a major figure. But for many people, this series became the clearest expression of who he was as an artist. It united his strengths in one place: grandeur, beauty, faith, emotion, discipline, and deep visual control. That is why the making of Jesus of Nazareth still draws attention today. People are not only interested in the story on the screen, they are interested in what it cost to make it, how Zeffirelli shaped it, how the cast endured it, and why the atmosphere around the production felt so intense and unusual. There is something almost mysterious about the fact that a television miniseries from 1977 still feels alive in the memory of so many viewers. Part of that mystery belongs to the subject itself, but part of it belongs to Franco Zeffirelli. He understood that some stories cannot be directed mechanically. They have to be approached with conviction. Not certainty in every detail, but conviction about tone, meaning, and emotional truth. That is what he brought to the film. And whether one sees Jesus of Nazareth as art, devotion, television history, or all three at once, it is impossible to separate its power from the man who led it. Franco Zeffirelli's life was shaped by hardship, discipline, beauty, and ambition. He rose from a difficult beginning to become one of the most visually distinctive directors of his generation. But among all his work, Jesus of Nazareth remains one of his greatest legacies because it brought together everything he knew how to do. He created scale without losing intimacy. He created beauty without empty spectacle. And he told one of the world's most sacred stories in a way that felt emotional, human, and unforgettable. What makes the story even more compelling is that the production itself was filled with pressure, exhaustion, controversy, emotional strain, and unusual moments that left a lasting mark on those who were part of it. The stillness of Robert Powell's performance, the emotional burden carried by the cast, the harsh filming conditions, the public anxiety before release, and the long-lasting reaction of audiences all remind us that Jesus of Nazareth was never just another television production. It was an artistic risk with spiritual weight behind it, and maybe that is why people still return to it. Some films are watched once and admired for a season. Others stay with people for years. Jesus of Nazareth belongs to the second group, and Franco Zeffirelli is one of the main reasons why. Now I want to ask you something. When you think about Jesus of Nazareth, what stays with you most? Is it Robert Powell's face, the emotion of the crucifixion scenes, the quiet power of the storytelling, or the knowledge of what the cast and director went through to bring it to life? And among all the directors who have brought biblical stories to the screen, do you think Franco Zeffirelli still stands above the rest?